For decades, film archivists believed they understood the full anatomy of a soundtrack. Every hiss, every hum, every imperfection could be traced to the machines that created it. Analog gear had a signature, tape left its scars, and mixers left fingerprints in the frequencies they shaped. Nothing was truly unexplainable, just undocumented, or so they thought. That belief began to crack when restoration engineers revisited a handful of sci-fi films from the late 20th century. These were ordinary releases, screened publicly, sold on VHS, projected in small-town theaters. But when their audio tracks were digitized at high resolution, something surfaced beneath the music, beneath the dialogue, beneath even the noise floor. Patterns, pulses, tone clusters that didn't match any known production process of their era. Some appeared for only a fraction of a second, others stretched across entire scenes like a thin wire of sound threaded through the film. None appeared in studio logs. When technicians attempted to isolate them, the anomalies behaved like signals structured, intentional, and eerily consistent across different prints from different decades. They weren't artifacts. They weren't glitches. They weren't supposed to be there. The strangest part wasn't the discovery itself, it was what people reported after hearing them. A faint pressure behind the eyes, a sudden chill, a déjà vu so sharp it felt rehearsed. One archivist described it as a message sent to a version of me that doesn't exist anymore. Studios denied everything, of course. They issued statements about misread data and compression illusions. But quietly, without drawing attention, several remastered editions removed the frequencies entirely, flattening the tracks, smoothing the anomalies, sealing the strangeness back into silence. What remains are 15 films, 15 broadcasts that slipped through the cracks of their own creation. Signals no one claimed, encoded into stories no one expected, and tonight we're opening that archive. 1. 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968, The Monolith Frequency Residue. During high-fidelity restoration of 2001, A Space Odyssey, engineers discovered an enigmatic low-frequency residue lingering beneath scenes involving the monolith. At first, it seemed like simple rumble, an artifact of aging magnetic tape. But closer examination revealed a near-impossible consistency. The frequency remained stable across multiple reels, multiple international prints, and even across different storage generations. It formed a continuous tonal band that defied mechanical drift, suggesting not artifact, but intention. When technicians isolated the residue, many reported an uncanny sensation, a subtle vertigo, a soft pressure in the chest, or the feeling of standing at the edge of a vast, unseen space. The tone structure contained harmonic imperfections that nonetheless repeated with deliberate spacing, creating a pattern closer to mathematical encoding than ambient noise. Some specialists compared the waveform to theoretical signatures used in early deep space communication modeling prototypes, never fully realized during the 1,960 seconds. Production notes offered no hints. Kubrick's meticulous documentation described experimental microphones, unique reverbs, and custom sound effects, yet the monolith residue appeared nowhere in the archives. Even stranger, attempts to remove the tone caused certain moments to lose their atmospheric tension, as if the frequency had become embedded within the emotional architecture of the film itself. Collectors with access to original theatrical prints sometimes report momentary expansions of perception during monolith sequences. A few described auditory illusions, tones shifting even when playback equipment remained unchanged. Engineers dismiss these impressions as psychological responses to iconic imagery, but the residue's persistence across decades fuels speculation that the film captured something external, something unaccounted for, hiding beneath the threshold of human hearing. Later remasters softened the anomaly, but traces survive in early releases. An infrasonic whisper woven into cinema's most enigmatic artifact, echoing a presence that feels both cosmic and unsettlingly close. 2. Solaris, 1972. The cognitive reverberation layer. During a comprehensive restoration of Tarkovsky's Solaris, audio engineers isolated an unusual reverberation effect layered beneath the film's already dreamlike soundscape. Unlike traditional reverb, which decays predictably, this secondary reverberation appeared to swell inward, pulling the listener toward its center rather than dispersing outward. More unsettling was its timing. The effect emerged only during scenes addressing memory, identity, or the fluid boundary between reality and emotional projection. Spectrogram analysis uncovered that the reverberation traced a waveform inconsistent with physical acoustics. Instead of reflecting environmental characteristics, it followed patterns that closely resembled electrophysiological signals, echoes comparable to those produced by neural oscillations. The idea that the film's audio track might contain a cognitive signature was dismissed as poetic exaggeration, yet no analog equipment of the early 1970 seconds could explain the rhythmic nuances discovered. Listeners exposed to the isolated reverberation reported intense and unusual reactions. Some described a sudden return of forgotten childhood memories. Others felt a dissociative, drifting sensation, as if standing between two overlapping realities. A few claimed that the reverberation held on to them even after the sound stopped, an auditory afterimage lingering like an emotional echo. Attempts to remove the layer destabilized multiple surrounding frequencies, suggesting it was structurally entrenched within the film's audio architecture. Yet no production documentation mentions unconventional reverberation techniques or neurological sound experiments. The anomalies' emotional impact aligns suspiciously well with the film's themes: a consciousness confronted with itself, memories made manifest, reality bending under the weight of human longing. In later releases, especially certain international remasters, the reverberation seems muted, as though modern cleanup tools erased something that once blurred the line between sound and thought. Whether intentionally embedded or accidentally captured, the cognitive reverberation layer remains an acoustic mystery, one that mirrors Solaris itself, haunting, introspective, and impossible to fully grasp. 3. The Andromeda Strain 1971, the bioacoustic irregularity. When audio preservationists transferred the magnetic tracks of the Andromeda Strain into a modern digital environment, they uncovered a recurring irregularity that defied conventional explanation. Embedded beneath the film's sterile laboratory ambiance was a thin, oscillating tone that fluttered between microfrequencies too precise to be produced by the analog equipment used in 1971. The tone behaved almost like biological telemetry, changing subtly whenever characters approached contaminated environments or discussed the nature of the extraterrestrial microorganism. Its reactive quality made some archivists wonder if the anomaly was tied to the narrative in ways no production note ever mentioned. Spectrogram readings revealed that the oscillation carried rhythmic patterns resembling respiration cycles. Yet the fluctuations were not steady enough to resemble human breath, nor mechanical enough to match pumps or ventilation systems. Instead, the waveform displayed irregular spikes, as though something were responding within the frequency. When technicians isolated the tone, many reported a sudden awareness shift, the subtle impression that the sound was observing them, not the other way around. Attempts to recreate the tone using era-specific synthesizers and radiophonic equipment failed consistently. The anomaly exhibited properties common to early biomedical sensors devices that were not part of the film's audio chain. A handful of researchers suggested that the tone might have originated from an external signal inadvertently captured during production, but no known broadcast system of the era operated at that peculiar micro-frequency range. Later remastered editions filtered out the anomaly almost entirely. Curiously, early collectors claim the film felt colder in its original mix, as if the story carried a living resonance beneath its scientific detachment. Whether artifact or intrusion, the bioacoustic irregularity remains one of the film's most enigmatic elements, a pulse-like whisper lurking beneath a story about life forms too small to see and too alien to comprehend. 4. THX 11381971, the sublevel interference pattern. During the archival remastering of THX 1138, audio technicians encountered a persistent interference pattern embedded within scenes set in the sterile underground complexes. It manifested as a layered hum, 3 tones stacked atop one another, each oscillating at slightly different rates. The pattern was so precisely spaced that it resembled the kind of tri-band interference generated by industrial communication systems, not by a film's audio equipment. Yet the film's original production logs contain no evidence of such systems being anywhere near the recording environment. What made the anomaly more unsettling was its behavior when isolated. The 3 tones appeared to drift in and out of phase with uncanny regularity, creating pulses that suggested coordination rather than randomness. One engineer likened it to a conversation occurring in slow motion, with each tone responding to the others as though following an unseen directive. The pulses intensified during scenes of conformity, surveillance, or identity suppression, leading some restorers to speculate whether the anomaly had been purposefully embedded as commentary, an idea quickly dismissed due to the limitations of early 1970 seconds sound technology. Listeners who experienced the isolated pattern reported a growing unease, accompanied by a sensation of internal pressure. A few claimed they felt briefly disconnected from their surroundings, as if the tones were nudging their perception into a narrower frame. These subjective reports, though inconsistent, echoed the film's themes too closely to ignore. Attempts to recreate the interference using vintage equipment failed repeatedly. No combination of hums, oscillators, or room resonances matched the precision of the anomaly. When a later 5.1 remaster of the film was prepared, the interference nearly vanished, filtered out by noise reduction algorithms that treated it as unwanted artifact. Whether the pattern originated from malfunction, contamination, or an unintended capture of external frequencies, its presence left a curious imprint on THX 1138, a spectral architecture humming beneath the story of a society engineered through sound, control, and silence. 5. Logan's Run, 1976. The analog sweep distortion. During a meticulous restoration of Logan's Run, audio engineers stumbled upon a strange distortion embedded within the film's signature synth passages. Unlike typical analog warble, the distortion swept through frequency bands with mechanical precision, creating a rising and falling pattern too consistent to be machine drift. More perplexing was how the sweep appeared only during scenes dealing with renewal, carousel sequences, or moments when characters questioned the nature of their world, as if the anomaly were tied thematically to the story rather than to equipment failure. Spectrograms revealed that the distortion contained micro-interval jumps, each separated by exact mathematical spacing. These jumps formed a lattice-like pattern that resembled early modulation mapping techniques not publicly documented in the mid-1970 seconds. No analog synthesizer of the time could produce these exact fluctuations without custom circuitry, yet none of the film's production notes reference any special equipment beyond standard EMS and Moog instruments. Collectors who played early vinyl and magnetic prints reported subtle physical reactions when the sweep distortion surfaced: a tightening around the temples, a sudden coldness in the hands, or a fleeting sense of detachment from the surrounding room. Some described a strange déjà vu associated with brightly lit spaces, as though the sound was tied to a memory they never lived. As more listeners described similar reactions, the anomaly gained a small but devoted community of researchers who believed the distortion represented encoded data rather than audio error. Attempts to replicate the sweep using vintage gear produced similar tonal character but never the same structural precision. The anomaly seemed to resist reproduction, behaving like a signal that required conditions not present in conventional studio setups. Later remasters reduced the distortion dramatically, flattening the audio's complexity and removing the anomaly's most distinct qualities. Whether an unintended imprint, an overlooked experimental element, or something that slipped into the soundtrack beyond human control, the analog sweep distortion remains one of Logan's Run's most enduring mysteries, an echo of a system operating beneath the fictional one shown on screen. 6. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. The secondary pattern emergence. When audio preservationists revisited Close Encounters of the Third Kind, they expected the famous five-tone motif to dominate the spectrogram. It did, but something else did too. Beneath the central musical phrase, tucked into the harmonic bed, lay a faint secondary sequence that did not correspond to any recorded instrument. At first, the anomaly resembled faint modulation noise, but closer analysis revealed a repeating pitch architecture that mirrored the motif's contour while subtly diverging from it, as though another voice were responding in parallel. This underlying pattern surfaced only in certain mixes, primarily early theatrical prints and a handful of rare optical soundtracks, while later home video editions seemed to mute or entirely erase it. Engineers who isolated the anomaly reported that the hidden sequence followed mathematical ratios not present in John Williams' composition. Strangely, the intervals aligned with radio communication tests performed in the 1970 seconds by researchers studying frequency-based response protocols. Listeners exposed to the isolated sequence described sensations of pressure behind the eyes or moments of sudden emotional clarity. Some said the pattern felt anticipatory, like a message waiting for a reply. Archivists joked it was merely an artifact of overworked analog machines, but none could duplicate the effect using era-accurate equipment. The anomaly persisted no matter how the audio was reconstructed, implying it was embedded in the original recording process, yet no notes mention experimental overlays or guided tones. Attempts to remove the secondary pattern caused the surrounding orchestration to distort, as if the anomaly had become a structural part of the soundtrack rather than an accidental intrusion. When the studio remastered the film decades later, technicians smoothed out the spectral range, erasing the anomaly entirely. Dedicated collectors insist that something intangible was lost, a subtle tension or unspoken resonance that once lived beneath the film's most iconic musical exchange. Whether accidental, emergent, or captured unintentionally during production, the secondary pattern remains one of cinema's most curious audio shadows, a faint call layered beneath a call, waiting for a listener who might recognize its shape. 7. Alien 1979. The Deep Sector Beacon Signature. During archival preservation of Alien, a recurring signal was detected beneath several ambient spacecraft scenes. At first listen, it resembled distant mechanical rumbling, but under spectral analysis, the rumble revealed a pattern of rising and falling frequencies that repeated with uncanny regularity. The structure was strikingly similar to maritime distress beacons, except slowed to a fraction of normal speed and pitched far below typical human hearing. Some engineers speculated it could be an accidental blend of layered sound effects, yet the precision of the pattern contradicted the randomness expected from analog mixing. The beacon-like signature appeared most prominently during scenes involving isolation or imminent danger, when Dallas enters the ventilation shafts, when Ripley walks cautiously through the empty corridors, when the crew confronts the unknown, each moment is accompanied by the faint, pulsing signal. One technician described it as a heartbeat that isn't human. No production documents mention such an element, and none of the surviving sound engineers recall designing it. Listeners exposed to isolated versions of the tone reported unusual impressions, a sense of distance collapsing, a feeling that something vast and far older than the ship was trying to communicate. A few even described momentary flashes of imagery, metallic structures, corridors that did not match the Nostromo, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. These claims were never taken seriously, yet they persisted across people who had never spoken to one another. Attempts to decode the frequency shifts produced conflicting interpretations. Some argued the signature resembled underwater sonar. Others noted similarities to experimental communication tests from deep space tracking stations. None of these explanations fit the timeline or equipment used in 1979. Later remasters softened the low-end spectrum, diminishing the beacon until it nearly disappeared. But original theatrical prints still carry the pulse, a hidden signal woven through the quietest parts of Alien, echoing a presence that may never have belonged to the film at all. 8. The Black Hole 1979. The gravitic oscillation tone. During a 4K multi-channel restoration of The Black Hole, technicians encountered a peculiar low-frequency oscillation embedded within several scenes featuring the ship's proximity to the singularity. Unlike traditional bass tones used to convey cosmic scale, this oscillation drifted unpredictably, as though it were responding to movements outside the soundtrack. The waveform pulsed at intervals too irregular to be musical, yet too deliberate to be accidental, forming a pattern that some specialists compared to early gravitational wave simulations decades before such concepts were widely recognized. The anomaly displayed a unique behavior. When isolated, it seemed to destabilize, as if its structure depended on the rest of the mix to remain coherent. Engineers described it as a tone that collapses when observed, a comment made half-jokingly until more tests revealed that the oscillation indeed changed shape depending on the resolution and method of analysis. Some restorers who monitored the tone for extended periods reported odd physiological effects, mild nausea, disorientation, and a sensation of leaning sideways despite sitting still. A few felt an inexplicable emotional heaviness, as though the sound were drawing something out of them. None of these reactions matched known auditory responses to low-frequency vibration. Historical production notes offered no clues. The film's sound designers denied incorporating experimental sub-frequency beds, yet the anomaly remained identical across multiple surviving prints of different generations. Its consistency suggested intentionality, even though its origin pointed towards something that could not have been planned with 1,970 seconds technology. When Disney prepared a later remaster, the oscillation vanished, scrubbed by modern filters designed to eliminate irregular bass artifacts. Some fans claimed the newer versions felt emptier, lacking a strange tension they couldn't articulate. Whether the oscillation was a fluke of analog machinery or a captured resonance of unknown origin, it remains one of the most enigmatic audio imprints hidden in a film about staring into an abyss that might be staring back. 9. Tron 1982, the binary drift layer. When archivists transferred the original Tron audio stems into modern digital workstations, they expected to uncover the usual analog inconsistencies: flutter, static, tape hiss. What they found instead was a secondary audio layer, invisible to standard meters, but unmistakable when viewed under deep spectrum analysis. This layer wasn't noise, it was structured. A constant sequence of rapid binary-like pulses appeared beneath the music and effects, forming repeating clusters that resembled truncated data packets. The pulses maintained a precise tempo that did not align with the film's score, suggesting they originated outside the main mixing chain. When the anomaly was isolated, engineers noted something even stranger. The binary-like bursts changed subtly depending on the scene. During the light cycle chase, the patterns became denser, as if responding to the entropy of the moment. In quieter scenes, the pulses softened into longer, sustained bursts, almost melodic in contour. No equipment used in 1982 should have been able to generate such adaptive modulation, and none of the film's production documentation references data layer experimentation. Collectors of early prints who listened with high-fidelity headphones described sensations of internal flickering, like faint flashes behind closed eyes. Some reported intrusive mental imagery grids, shifting geometric shapes, or the sense of traveling through a confined tunnel. At first, these accounts were dismissed as imaginative associations with the film's digital aesthetic. But after the anomaly was discovered, the parallels became difficult to ignore. Attempts to decode the data layer produced contradictory results. Some claimed the pulses matched early packet switching tests from experimental computer networks of the era. Others suggested they resembled error correction sequences from telecommunication systems not commercially available at the time. Later re-releases quietly removed the drift layer, smoothing the track into a cleaner but noticeably less mysterious form. Whether the anomaly was an accidental imprint from an external system or an unexplained intrusion that the film unknowingly captured remains a question suspended between the digital and the uncanny, much like Tron itself. 10. Blade Runner 1982, the synthetic echo artifact. During a full-spectrum restoration of Blade Runner, engineers identified an echo pattern that defied all known acoustic modeling of the era. Hidden beneath Vangelis's atmospheric synth lines was a faint, repeating ripple and echo with no originating sound. Unlike traditional reverberation, which decays naturally, this ripple grew sharper as it repeated, as though converging rather than fading. It appeared only in scenes featuring replicants or artificial memories, creating the eerie impression that the film's machinery was speaking in its own coded language. Attempts to isolate the echo produced baffling results. When separated from the music, the pattern formed a looping structure with microscopic fluctuations in timing variations, too intentional to be random. One technician noted that the fluctuations corresponded suspiciously well to the film's visual motifs: neon signs flickering, rain striking metal, the rhythm of synthetic life. Yet no mixing notes mention experimental signal layering, and the tools available in 1982 would have made generating such precise interference nearly impossible without specialized equipment. Collectors of early analog copies reported uncanny sensations while listening through high-fidelity speakers. Some felt a slight tug behind the eyes, as if a memory were trying to surface. Others described déjà vu, linked to scenes they hadn't watched in years. A few even claimed the echo seemed to respond to their movement in the room, an observation dismissed by engineers but persistently repeated by listeners. The anomaly vanished in later restorations. The 1992 director's cut softened its presence. The 2007 final cut removed it entirely. Archivists argue that the removal cleaned the mix, but some believe it erased an accidental glimpse into something unintended, an audio ghost created by overlapping technologies, or a captured signal that slipped into the film's circuitry unnoticed. Whether artifact or intrusion, the synthetic echo remains one of the most enigmatic audio signatures hidden within a film obsessed with the boundary between the artificial and the real. 11. The Terminator, 1984. The temporal residue pattern. When audio specialists revisited the Terminator for a remaster, they encountered a recurring resonance embedded within scenes involving time displacement. The tone, a deep, metallic hum that fluctuated unpredictably, sat far below normal audible thresholds. It behaved like infrasonic energy, but carried a faint harmonic shimmer, a quality no standard mixing equipment of 1984 could have produced unintentionally. The hum appeared only when the narrative touched the idea of futures collapsing into the present. During Kyle Reese's flashbacks, during the arrival of the Terminator, even in brief moments where characters reference time, the resonance surfaced as though tethered to thematic beats rather than technical ones. Some restorers wondered if the original soundtrack designer had embedded an experimental sublayer, but the production logs contain no mention of subharmonic beds or deep frequency textures. Spectral analysis revealed a repeating curvature in the waveform, an arc that cycled every 1.9 seconds. No known analog device of the era produced such consistency. More perplexing was its interaction with human listeners. Several technicians reported a tightening sensation in the chest or a momentary shift in spatial perception, similar to standing near heavy industrial machinery. One described it as a sound that pretends not to exist. Rumors began circulating among collectors who owned early theatrical cassettes. Some claimed the resonance changed depending on playback environment, growing stronger in narrow rooms or when the volume was low. Others insisted the pattern resembled early research data from temporal physics studies, though no evidence supports the comparison. In later releases, particularly the 2001 DVD mix, the low-frequency bed was heavily filtered, eliminating the anomaly. Whether this was intentional or simply a consequence of modern mastering is unknown. What remains is a residue, an imprint in the film's earliest forms, suggesting a signal whose purpose aligns disturbingly well with the movie's theme, something from another time bleeding into the present, unnoticed and unexplained. 12. Predator 1987. The cloak modulation signal. During a high-resolution audio transfer of Predator, technicians stumbled upon an unusual modulation pattern tucked beneath the creature's iconic clicking sounds. Initially dismissed as an artifact created by layering animal recordings, the anomaly revealed a far more unsettling structure when analyzed closely. Every time the Predator activates its cloaking device, a faint oscillation emerges, barely audible, yet too rhythmic to be accidental. The oscillation forms a rising and falling ladder of tones, each separated by exact mathematical intervals, as if mimicking the sweep of a scanning system. The anomaly doesn't sync with any known audio element in the film. It predates digital spectral tools and does not align with analog modulation behaviors of the 1980 seconds. More confusing, the signal appears only in some prints, not all. Early theatrical mixes contain it, several VHS releases do not, and certain international versions exhibit a stronger version, as though the signal had been recorded from a different source entirely. Archivists who listened to isolated tracks reported strange physiological reactions. One described a sudden spike of awareness, like sensing a presence just out of view. Another felt a brief disorientation, as if the sound were trying to triangulate its listener. Spectrograms added another layer of mystery. The anomaly resembled a simplified form of phased array radar technology that was not publicly referenced in entertainment mixing at the time. When Fox was questioned during an archival review, they insisted the modulation was an unintended composite of sound elements. But internal memos from the era revealed that the original sound team had already noticed the anomaly and could not trace its origin. Their notes mention extra sweeps that appeared after final mixing sessions had ended, as if the film had captured an external transmission no one noticed during production. Whether coincidence or intrusion, the signal hides within the very scenes that portray invisibility, an audio signature that, like the Predator itself, flickers at the edge of perception. 13. They Live 1988, the sub-broadcast pulse. While restoring They Live for a modern release, a team of audio technicians noticed a faint, rhythmic pulse concealed beneath several scenes that featured television broadcasts. At first, they assumed it was an artifact from the film's analog mixing process, But the pulse wasn't random. It maintained a precise interval every 4.27 seconds regardless of scene length, dialogue, or music. When mapped on a spectrogram, the pulse formed a pattern resembling an encoded carrier signal, the kind typically used to hide a message within a broadcast stream. What baffled experts was the era. 1,988 sound mixing equipment wasn't capable of generating such structured sub-audio modulation without deliberate design. And yet, no production notes, no engineering logs, and no surviving staff interviews mention anything remotely like it. The pulse gained notoriety among collectors who noticed an uncanny effect when listening through headphones. Some described a tingling sensation in the jaw. Others felt a creeping awareness, as if someone had entered the room behind them. A few even reported a strange cognitive echo. Words in the film seemed to repeat internally, even though the soundtrack did not loop. Attempts to decode the pulse produced conflicting results. One researcher claimed it resembled a truncated numbers station broadcast. Another argued it matched military low-frequency communication tests conducted in the late 80s. Neither interpretation could be verified. When the studio was confronted with the anomaly, they issued a brief statement attributing it to equipment irregularities present in early analog prints. Yet, subsequent remasters removed the pulse entirely, smoothing the frequency range and eliminating any trace of the pattern. Whether the sub-broadcast pulse was an accident, a forgotten experiment, or an unintended transmission captured on tape, it remains one of the most unsettling audio anomalies hidden inside a film about hidden messages, an echo beneath a broadcast designed to reveal a truth no one was prepared to hear. 14. Dark City 1998. The Shifting Harmonic Thread. During a 4K archival restoration of Dark City, audio specialists uncovered a faint harmonic thread that drifted unpredictably across the upper frequency spectrum. Unlike typical analog hiss, this thread moved with intention, sliding between tones in a way that suggested modulation rather than noise. It appeared most prominently during the film's memory alteration sequences, as if the sound itself were reshaping its identity in parallel with the narrative. The anomaly resisted isolation. Whenever technicians attempted to extract the tone, it fractured into dozens of micro-frequencies, each carrying its own discrete contour. One engineer compared it to a chord that didn't want to remain a chord. The behavior puzzled even seasoned restorers, who noted that the technology used to mix Dark City could not have produced such a phenomenon accidentally. Even stranger were audience reports from early screenings. Several viewers claimed certain scenes triggered a sensation of standing somewhere they had never been, or remembering something that did not belong to them. At the time, these comments were dismissed as reactions to the film's surreal atmosphere. But the resurfaced audio thread has reignited old questions. Why did so many people report memory-based anomalies tied to specific sequences? Studio logs offer no mention of experimental sound layers, and the film's mixers deny embedding anything beyond conventional effects. Yet the drifting harmonics exhibit a consistency appearing at the same timestamps across multiple surviving prints that cannot be explained by tape damage or copy degradation. When the remastered edition was released years later, the harmonic thread was gone. Some say its removal left the film feeling less disorienting, less dreamlike. Others believe the anomaly was never meant to be heard in the first place, that it belonged to a layer of the film concealed beneath the surface, waiting for the rare listener who could follow its shifting path. 15. The Matrix 1999. The Packet Drift Anomaly. When engineers examined early theatrical DTS prints of The Matrix, they expected to find the usual digital imperfections common to late 90-seconds audio encoding. Instead, they uncovered what appeared to be a repeating burst of highly compressed data hidden beneath the low-end rumble of several key scenes. At first, the bursts were dismissed as packet loss, harmless digital corruption caused by aging storage. But the structure of the anomaly didn't behave like missing data. It behaved like an inserted signal. Each burst lasted exactly the same duration, down to the millisecond, and followed a pattern inconsistent with any known codec used in 1999. More unsettling, the bursts appeared only during scenes that referenced déjà vu, glitches, or system interference within the film's narrative. Some technicians swore the anomalies were commenting on the scenes themselves, as though the audio had been altered to mimic the film's internal logic. Attempts to parse the signal produced unreadable sequences, yet the waveform exhibited characteristics of early spread-spectrum communication technology that, at the time, was almost never used in film audio. One archivist claimed the data resembled fragments of a message that had been shredded and scattered through the noise. When Warner Brothers was approached for clarification, they denied any knowledge of secondary data layers. But quietly, remastered releases in the 2000s smoothed out the low end, removing the anomalies entirely. Collectors who still own original theatrical mixes say the audio presses against the mind, as if something inside the track vibrates at a frequency meant to be felt rather than heard. Whether the anomalies were deliberate, accidental, or something stranger remains unknown. All we know is that The Matrix, a film obsessed with hidden systems, carried a signal no one can trace, embedded in a world that questioned what was real in the first place. If these signals truly were never meant to surface, then what else lies buried in the films we think we already understand? Every anomaly we traced tonight began as background noise, something overlooked, unheard, unnoticed. Yet each one hinted at a broadcast slipping through the cracks of its own creation. If you want to keep following the echoes, keep opening the doors they left half shut, you know where to find us. The archive is still expanding, and some frequencies haven't revealed themselves yet.